Am I a movie reaction channel? No. Am I a life coach who loves movies and nerds out about discussing shows and movies and books with important life lessons that they teach us and how to apply them to my normal life? Yes. So, welcome to this absolutely random yet on brand episode. Last week, I saw the new movie called The Invite, starring Seth Rogen, Olivia Wilde, Penelope Cruz, and Ed Norton. And I literally couldn't make it home from the theater before I started writing notes and capturing my immediate reaction to this incredible movie. These people hate themselves. They will contort themselves, suffer, and agonize to an unreasonable degree before causing anyone else to be inconvenienced or confronted. Her reaction is a genuine look of disgust and repulsion. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Ellen, a certified life coach, a singer, a mother, and a lover of alliteration, dogs, and deep conversation. And this is the Contentment Creator channel, the show typically designed for creative entrepreneurs to dig deep and clarify their life vision, catalyze their creative flow, and fuel their entrepreneurial fire. So, if you're interested in topics about personal development and healing, entrepreneurship and empowerment, and creativity and authenticity, then you're in the right place, and I encourage you to subscribe. It's free to you and important to me, and most importantly, it connects us. So, this segment, I want to talk about people pleasing and perfectionism because the writing is all over the wall in this movie. Olivia's character is named Angela, and she is married to Seth Rogen's character named Joe. And together they create the dysfunction of this movie. And Angela's character is the one I want to pay specific attention to in this episode. So I'm just going to put it out there from the beginning. These people hate themselves. And it becomes increasingly obvious as we go throughout the movie because of the way that they speak to each other and then the way they speak about themselves, especially after they are invited to. I guess I should go ahead and say spoiler alert, because if you're watching me talk about this movie, I'm assuming you've seen the movie. So please click away if you have not. So one of the dead giveaway scenes that I started paying attention to Angela's perfectionism and people pleasing was when she said to Joe, "It's like you want everybody to be uncomfortable." And for the unconscious people pleaser, the idea of causing someone else to be uncomfortable, no matter how uncomfortable you yourself feel, is just entirely too much. They will contort themselves, suffer, and agonize to an unreasonable degree before causing anyone else to be inconvenienced or confronted. And the result is that your needs and wants become less and less important over time to the point that you start to have no idea what you really need or want anymore. And that deep disconnection not only affects yourself, but also erodes our ability to create healthy relationships. So when you disconnect yourself from your needs, it becomes truly impossible to connect with and support someone else in meeting their needs as well, as you can see in Olivia and Joe's marriage. So the perfectionism we see on display throughout this movie, you can see the intense commitment and satisfaction Angela gets from all of the house projects and design work she's done. It's a great example of how we can lose ourselves to the illusion of perfection instead of simply enjoying doing things with a standard of excellence. Examples of this in the movie that stood out to me were the souffle and the charcuterie board right from the beginning, where something she created to be enjoyed and eaten turns into something that causes her extreme anxiety and shame and disconnection when Pina tells her, "I don't eat meat or dairy or gluten." And then she burns the souffle. Her anxiety over doing it perfectly and preserving the perfection to be witnessed by her guests by swatting away Joe from eating anything before they get there disconnects her not only from herself, her husband, her guests, but also the entire purpose of the act. The shame that she so evidently feels when one of her guests doesn't eat what she's prepared completely zaps all of the joy out of doing the thing. Because when we, as perfectionists, invest ourselves so deeply into a task because we are committed to the end result being perfect, and then the end result isn't perfect, that means we have not only suffered our way through the process to achieve this result that we imagined was going to give us everything we hoped for, but then when we don't get that closed loop, when we don't get the result that we actually want, then literally we have suffered through the process and the result, and there has been not a single ounce of joy. That is why so many people say enjoy the journey and not the destination. And a perfectionist cannot do that because a perfectionist's goal is only in the result. I believe, as a recovering perfectionist myself, there are ways that we can access that heightened level of excellence and commitment to like achieving something great without sacrificing ourselves or the experience of joy in the process of doing it. Poor Angela has never had therapy and coaching around this, though, as evidenced by the fact that she killed herself to make this happen. She lied to her husband about how the whole thing came to be. She absolutely lost all the light in her eyes and the soul in her body when she found out that her guests couldn't even eat that thing. And the thing about it is it's not like what she's doing, it's the way she invests so much of her heart and self-worth even in what she's doing without any sort of healthy boundaries or a rooted sense of self or worthiness, really. For example, like commitment to excellence here would look like her serving food that she's proud of herself for preparing, but allowing others to experience it as they will. Like Joe nibbling before the guests arrive, the guests eating or not eating as they like, trusting everyone can take care of themselves. Offering appropriate drinks, for example, when we get to the scene where obviously Joe has not read the text that she asked for wine, she blames him and shames him for not getting the wine. And when the guests ask for wine because she asked an open-ended question, they look at each other and she instructs Joe to go get their anniversary wine that is limited edition from Joe's dead uncle, and like they're opening it for this completely inappropriate occasion where they're meeting neighbors in their house for the first time. So, offering appropriate drinks based on what they have to give rather than just giving and giving and giving when there's simply no need because she lacks clear boundaries. She could have said easily, "We have champagne, tequila, or water. Which one would you prefer?" And they could make a joke out of the fact that they forgot wine. And honestly, it doesn't seem like Peanut or Hawk would have had any sort of negative reaction to that. But because of that intense level of people pleasing and perfectionism that Angela's character models for us, she asks the open question, receiving their kind of neutral answer, yeah, we'd like wine, and then bending over backwards to meet that request. That is just the height of people pleasing and perfectionism without any sort of conscious tools or therapy and coaching or healing work having been done. All of those toxic traits combine and collide into making really intensely destructive patterns for Angela's mental health. Another couple of things that I noticed when you really go through the movie with a fine-tooth comb, there were a few moments that stood out with her people pleasing as well that I just want to share here for your consideration. Focusing on the rug for a second. So she went to go buy a new rug to kind of finish the living room before she's having this party for her neighbors. And nothing in and of itself I found to be wrong with her going and getting a rug and getting these final touches done in her house. As a fellow interior design enthusiast, hobbyist person, I understand the way a party can become kind of a goalpost for finishing the last few things in a room that just really bring it together. However, if you notice in her reactions in the movie, you'll see that every time someone notices something, like Joe points out, like, is this a new rug? She lights up like 1,000 suns, like someone has finally seen her and acknowledged something that means a lot to her. And I'll discuss this in the next segment about like what happens in that moment when he kind of teases her for getting it for the party. But she also does it over and over again when the guests come, when Hawk comments on all of the different interior design things she's done. around the house and compliments her eye and the energy and all that kind of stuff, the thing that I noticed is that there is just like a before compliment and after compliment Angela. And when someone sees this thing that she's put a lot of thought and energy into, it's like that dopamine or that like thing that every perfectionist just deeply yearns for, which is someone acknowledging their work, someone acknowledging just how perfect something looks or how beautiful something is, or just like really just any kind of compliment of the thing that they really invested so much effort into. So, in contrast to the deli meat and charcuterie board that totally failed because one of her guests didn't eat meat or dairy, it's the opposite where, like, she does all of this work to make her home look perfect, and any sort of little acknowledgement or compliment is gonna send her to the moon and back, and that is what keeps a perfectionist going, and that's what keeps kind of watering the weeds of this habit for people by just surviving from one compliment to the next. It's like a drink of water in the desert, where perfectionism is an awful, plaguing, suffering habit, except for when we get something right and someone sees the vision that we fulfilled and compliments it and really acknowledges what it took to create that or how beautiful it works or whatever, whatever the thing is. And that's why that habit sticks so long, because the payoff of we achieved the thing and someone noticed it and complimented us. Ooh, there's just no rub like that than when a perfectionist gets a compliment on their work. And then there were little things like how when Joe walks in from work and he's lying on the ground like a dead man, and she's makes him take off his shoes, and she's walking around with no shoes in her house. And then her guests very politely ask, "Would you like me to take off our shoes?" And even Hawk kind of reiterates and asks, like, "Are you sure you don't want us to take off our shoes?" And she says, "Oh no!" Like, she plays it off very cool and calm and collected. But what she really wants is people to take their shoes off. She's just so people pleasing that she just won't even have anything resembling a confrontational moment with another person that's not as close to her as Joe. And then the impact of that is that Joe is on the receiving end of a ton of criticism and perfectionism and nitpicking and controlling habits that can be the fuel for a perfectionist, where everything does, as Joe kind of comments on at the end during their conversation with Pina, that she controls every little thing that he does when he comes home from work. That is kind of the real Oz behind the curtain of a perfectionist at home, because they will control to extremes everyone in their like close relationships. But then when they are in a new relationship and they want to be liked and they want to please, and they want to come off as perfect to the outside, they will break their own boundaries and they will break their own rules and break their own commitments to themselves in order to be liked or to ease any convenience on anybody else. So it is quite the double-edged sword, because really we just break boundaries with ourselves. It erodes our own sense of selfhood and self-trust and self-knowing when she's someone who knows she doesn't want shoes in the house, but she tells other people it's okay to have shoes in the house. That lack of integrity between what she says and believes and what she does and says to other people, it breaks people. It just breaks you. So I see that happening within Angela's character over and over again. And finally, one thing that I really want to point out is that people pleasing and perfectionism at the root of all roots comes from a lack of self love and, in many cases, self hate. And you can hear it leaking out in the way that Angela and Joe speak about themselves, but Angela especially, that she not only doesn't love herself, but there's like a disgust and hatred towards herself. When she's arguing with Joe, for example, about why he can't bring up those sex noises that their neighbors are making tonight because they'll forever picture their dumb faces during sex. That kind of self-deprecation is not being used for humor, which I know can sometimes be a crutch. Rather, it's being presented as a valid reason not to do something. Like, God forbid they bring it up and then they picture her dumb face while they're having sex. If you look at her body language during that scene, it is just the height of self-loathing. And then it becomes really, really glaring when she's talking to Hawk during their initial rendezvous, and he expresses his genuine confusion at her lack of self-awareness of her own sexual power and attractiveness. And her reaction is a genuine look of disgust and repulsion, and then calls herself a stupid which she said is just her internal dialogue, and it's totally fine. No one needs a dissertation here on how extremely disrespectfully she speaks to herself, but my point I want to drive home is that people pleasing and perfectionism are often just masks to this kind of self talk. These tools and strategies we learn along the way to cover up and mask and mitigate those awful self loathing feelings that we feel towards ourselves, what's most needed is to pare down to the foundations of love, respect, and healing within yourself. Working with a therapist or coach is a fantastic place to start. And the way that we love ourselves shapes the way that we love others. So we can obviously see how much disrespect, disgust, and lack of care that these two have shown each other in their marriage is a habit now. And to change that will take reworking the habits that they've built between them, as well as healing and redefining their internal landscape. So I hope they don't hire Pina so they can all have sex together. But I do hope that they hire another equally skilled therapist in their fictional world to support them individually and as a couple to live out beautiful fictional lives. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts or ideas in the comments as well and what you noticed. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye.